Hey there, this is astrologer DK Brainerd, and I'm going to do a series of videos on Chiron. So we're going to talk about Chiron in the signs, some Chiron aspects, how to work with Chiron. In this first video, I want to just give you some background on Chiron, astrologically, mythologically, and then we'll take it from there. So Chiron, as you probably know, is known as the wounded healer. Chiron was discovered in 1977. And it was the first discovery of a new type of celestial body. And these bodies that orbit somewhere out past Saturn, in the realm of the outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and maybe beyond. I'll have to look that up. But they have some of the characteristics of asteroids and some of the characteristics of planets. So they're sometimes called planetoids. But Chiron was the first discovery of this new class of celestial objects. Maybe it's all happening in the stellosphere, as Jason of Archaics would say. Not sure, but we have ephemerides for them, and Chiron has a 50-year orbit. It's highly elliptical. So I'm going to show you a little video here. Chiron actually spends about 7 to 8 years in Pisces and Aries. And on the other side of the zodiac, in signs such as Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio, it whips through each of those signs in about 2 years. So it's a very unusual elliptical orbit for a body that, most astrologers, I would say most astrologers nowadays probably work with. And Chiron's orbit takes it between the orbits of Saturn and Uranus, and that's something that we'll look into in a future video. So Chiron is, as a centaur, half man, half horse, and the centaurs are always concerned with the integration of the instinctual animal side of the human being and the spiritual, rational, mental side. So Chiron being no exception there. The Centaurs mythologically were a pretty rowdy bunch. So they love to drink wine. And, there's so many stories of the Centaurs going to a party. I don't know if they were invited that often, but maybe crashing a party and getting loaded on some good Greek wine and then just going crazy, raping, killing, fighting, trying to make off with the women. And generally causing a lot of trouble and getting in a lot of trouble. So Chiron's interesting because Chiron, in fact, Melanie Reinhardt has a great book on Chiron, and I'll put that up in the description. But she talks about the origin story of Chiron. So Chiron was, he was abandoned at birth by his mother, Philyra. And Philyra was a goddess or a nymph who turned herself into a horse to avoid the attentions of Kronos. But Kronos actually, he turned himself into a horse, and then he mated with her, presumably still against her will. And when she turned back into a human, she had a baby, and the baby was Chiron, this half man, half horse being. And legend has it that Philyra was so disgusted by this, monstrous child that she abandoned him and basically got the gods to turn her into a linden tree so that she wouldn't have to deal with the awareness of everything that she'd been through and what she had brought into the world. Unwillingly, we might add. A lot of stories like that in ancient myth. So Chiron was found and raised by the sun god Apollo. So, Apollo definitely symbolizes reason and order, divine order in the Greek myths. And he taught Chiron in many of the arts of good manliness, So as Chiron grew older, he became a very wise man and was skilled in many arts, including medicine, archery, music, philosophy, and the natural sciences. He was considered to be a great teacher, and in fact was the teacher of some of the greatest heroes of ancient myth, including Hercules, Achilles, and Jason of the Golden Fleece myth. Chiron was eventually wounded by one of Hercules' poison arrows, and this happened during a typical Centaur story. I think they invited Hercules to a party at their place, and they got drunk and started a brawl. And Hercules is fighting all the Centaurs, and one of his poison arrows hit Chiron in the leg, and so Chiron, being immortal, couldn't die from the wound, but was cursed to live in agony, eternally. And one interesting part of the Chiron myth, because Chiron often shows up, if not always shows up, in our charts as, in quotes, the wound that never heals. So once we become aware of that wound, and Chiron symbolizes healing through awareness of our woundedness. So Chiron always heals through awareness. And that's an aphorism I picked up from the great astrologer Eric Francis over at Planet Waves many, many years ago. And I found it to be true in my chart and in the charts of my clients. But interestingly, Chiron couldn't heal his own wound, so that famous physician heal thyself, right? What his persecutors said to Jesus, I believe, on the cross. And Chiron, to me, has a lot of similarities with the Jesus Christ consciousness, with the myth of Jesus. He also has a lot of similarities with the myth of, or the archetype of, Prometheus. So Prometheus, you may recall, was the god who created humans out of clay and water, and was being punished by Zeus for another offense. Stole the fire from Mount Olympus, brought it to humans because Zeus wanted to do away with humans, and was ultimately punished by Zeus by being chained to a rock and having a giant raptor eat his liver every day. And then, being an immortal, his liver would regenerate overnight, and the bird would come back and eat his liver again. So Prometheus and Chiron are very entwined in myth. And basically, the end of Chiron's life, he was searching for ways to heal this wound to his leg. He was in agony. He was still doing his healing work for others, but he couldn't be healed, couldn't die. And so Hercules, whose arrow was the one that wounded him, and I've got a video somewhere up on YouTube with talking about Nessus and the myth of Nessus. So definitely one of the unruly, rowdy centaurs. But interestingly, Hercules' arrow figures prominently in the Nessus story as well. But Hercules goes to Zeus, intercedes, and one of the conditions for Prometheus being able to ever be released from his torment of being chained to the rock and having his liver eaten was that he had to have an immortal who would agree to take his place. And Hercules intercedes, gets Chiron permission to take Prometheus' place, and Chiron dies soon after. So he's able to die, and then he is immortalized as the constellation Centaurus. So interestingly, with the Hercules poison arrow, and then Hercules being the one who was the intercessor with the chief god and eventually got Chiron released from his agony, it's very much a symbol of the homeopathic idea that the poison, that which makes us sick, is also which cures us. So Chiron was famously an herbalist. He was, could be considered the god of homeopathic medicine, like cures like. And he was definitely a master healer, herbalist, master teacher. He taught the healing arts to Asclepius, who is considered to be the father of Western medicine. And so, major healing themes, but also this major wounding theme. So in the next video, we're going to look at how those two fit together. I want to show you the glyph for Chiron before we end this one. So Chiron's glyph is the key. And interestingly, Zane Stein, who was one of the preeminent Chiron researchers when Chiron was first discovered, and I had the good fortune of having him on one of my astrology radio shows on Empower Radio, I think years ago. And Zane Stein passed away a few years ago, or passed on, but I got to learn a lot from him, being one of the first astrologers to really work with Chiron or any of the centaurs. So interestingly, he says that the original glyph for Chiron, which looks like this, was commissioned by an artist, and it was made according to the golden section, so phi. And the proportions of the key shape and the X at the top were laid out according to the golden ratio, according to the length of the vertical spear, and also even the oval at the bottom. So usually we see kind of people, including myself, draw the Chiron glyph with more of a circle than an oval. But that was something interesting I found in my research today. So some of Chiron's mythological attributes are healer, teacher, leader, self-sacrifice, the divide between instinct and reason, or between wild nature and civilized order, the wound that never heals, the visionary self, the revolutionary, the innovator. And, I think just signing off with the idea that anytime we're dealing with Chiron or any of the centaurs, we want to keep in mind that there's always this, living in civilization. We're animals, we're mammals. We have this wild, powerful, instinctive side. And then we also have this mental, rational, spiritual side, and this desire for order and this desire to rein things in. So Chiron's always going to symbolize the need to integrate those two, much like Chiron's orbit, which takes him between Saturn, form, structure, authority, society, doing things the right way, the rules, and Uranus, innovation, lightning, insight, revolution, progressive, sudden, shocking change and overthrow of the old order, much better ways of doing things, much more efficient, innovative ways of doing things. Chiron symbolizes the bridge between those two sides of the self as well. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back in the next video to dig deeper into the nature of the Chiron wound. And then in future videos, we're going to look at how do we access Chiron to heal and I really believe that Chiron is this living archetype that can help us revolutionize our own lives. So we'll look at that.